While everyone is understandably focused on the shutdown and President Trump's latest outrageous comments, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo today was visiting Cairo, where he delivered a speech outlining the administration's Mideast policy. And if you were confused before the speech, trust me, you'd be likely even more so after. Andrew, if you, like me, just happened to see the banners that were coming up for what he was saying, and you were like, wait a minute, who's he talking about?
Right.
I was not alone, I think.
And I'll be fascinated to hear what our next guest has to say about them, Rich. But let's start with a comment from the Secretary that's probably getting the most attention, and rightfully so, since it could not be further from the truth.
The age of self-inflicted American shame is over, and so are the policies that produce so much needless suffering. Now comes the real new beginning. In just 24 months, actually less than 2 years, the United States under President Trump has reasserted its traditional role as a force for good in this region.
And then there was this doozy about Syria.
There's no contradiction whatsoever. The president's been very clear, and Ambassador Bolton and I have been very clear about this too. The threat from radical Islamic terrorism is real. ISIS continues. We fight them in many regions around the country. Our commitment to continuing to prevent Daesh growth, ISIS's growth, is real. It's important. We will continue at that.
No contradiction on that policy that we're leaving Syria, then we're not leaving Syria, then we're leaving Syria slowly. Pompeo also spent a lot of time blasting President Obama's policies in the Mideast. He rebuked Obama on Iran, Syria, and just about everything else the former president did in the region. Rich?
Andrew, thank you. And joining us now, Congressman Eliot Engel. He, a Democrat representing New York's 16th district, and he's also now the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Listen, we spent a lot of time obviously talking about some of the unbelievable comments the president made today as he left Washington. But I think almost lost in the news cycle were some of the equally jaw-dropping comments that came from Secretary Pompeo. Among them, what we just played for the audience, that the era of national shame is over, about talking about how our word is once again taken seriously around the globe. Beyond the hypocrisy or the, I guess, the otherworldliness of those comments, give me and the audience an idea, as chairman, what you're hearing in other world capitals from world leaders. Just how concerned are they, not just with Syria, but how seemingly we've given the shove to every ally and embraced every despot?
Well, you know that old movie Alice in Wonderland, that's what it is. It's Alice in Wonderland. It's totally devoid of reality, totally devoid of what's really on the ground. We have done more in these past 2 years to erode our friendship with our allies, to erode the agreements that sustained Europe in the post-World War II era, NATO, the European Union. Our word is not taken seriously anymore, and no one knows where we're going to come down. So I think there's been terrible damage done to our allies. I don't know what they're talking about, but from my perspective, it's been all negative and very little positive.
There's so many things as it relates with Syria, the president's position, obviously the Mattis resignation, then what we heard from Bolton. But as we sit here today, Congressman, do you know who changed the policy from what the president said in one tweet to then what Bolton said the next? Do we know if there's any coordination? Do we know who's involved in the decision-making on the policy? I'm talking about the process, let alone what we're saying to the world.
What's happened in this administration is what I call diplomacy, fly by the seat of your pants diplomacy. There's no consistency. There's nothing where one position you take builds upon another position. It's simply the president waking up one morning or finishing his dinner and deciding to come out with a statement that it has not been vetted, that it hasn't been checked with his cabinet members or his senior staff or anybody else. I mean, Mattis's resignation over what the president said about the United States leaving Syria was the first time in American history that a Secretary of Defense resign that way. And he resigned because Mattis knows that we cannot just simply pull our soldiers out without there being tremendous repercussions. Yes, we want to work towards winding down whatever we do there, but there's a time and there's a place and there's a way for everything. You know, we have had the Kurds as our loyal and faithful allies. If we were to pull out now, there'd be a massacre of the Kurds by the Turks. And that is something I think that will stain America if it happens, because people will just say, well, we're not going to make an alliance with the United States because the United States is not a good ally. You can't trust that there won't be some things happening that nobody would have imagined. So I think what happened is it probably caught Bolton and some of the other advisors by surprise. I think there's been an attempt there to try to move him back from his position. We've heard Lindsey Graham make statements like that, and Bolton, and I think they're right if indeed that's what's been happening. At some point we need to leave, but we need to do it where it will be the least amount of difficulties or casualties or problems with our troops. You don't just announce it, and then he makes a statement shortly after that Iran can do whatever it likes in Syria. He doesn't care. I mean, that is just unbelievable. First of all, it jeopardizes our ally Israel, number one. And number two, it goes contrary to everything else he said about the Iranians.
Explain this one to me. Mnuchin's on the Hill, and he's, I guess, trying to convince folks that we should roll back sanctions on a Russian oligarch here with close ties to Putin. Who thinks this is a good idea, especially just from a practical standpoint, given the Mueller probe? Do I have this right? Are they seriously pitching this idea?
Well, they've allowed him to keep 45% of the company, and we have some question. I and some of the other chairmen and women have questions about why this was allowed to happen, and we thought that Secretary Mnuchin would be able to give us exactly what happened, because none of us really understand it. I'm going to listen to what he has to say. I know there are a lot of other members that are interested in it. The Foreign Affairs Committee certainly is interested in it, and you know, again, we have this sort of relationship between Donald Trump and Putin and the Russians. It's something that just, you know, makes you scratch your head, because there's something there, and hopefully one day the truth will come out.
Last question, Congressman. I had an interesting debate with a few folks. Somebody said, you know what's gone on the last couple of years, we're going to look back and say, we learned an important civics lesson here, and where the line should start and stop between unchecked power of a White House and you know, that there are consequences when, you know, constitutional protections go out the window. Somebody else said no. The damage that we're going through right now isn't just going to be relegated to the term of Trump. There's going to be permanent scars much longer term as a consequence for this, and they noted on the global scale. As the chair of foreign relations, are the damages that are undergone, regardless of whether he's gone in 2 years or even before, are they permanent, or can we fix them? We just need somebody else in the Oval.
Well, they're permanent from a point of view of his Supreme Court appointees or his judicial appointees, which are very much to the right and very worrisome, not mainstream at all. So that, of course, is a worry. But in an international relations or foreign affairs situation, we have countries now that are our closest allies who once didn't make a move without consulting with us, who now mistrusts us and thinks that we have a president who doesn't care about them and doesn't care about the alliances. So I think that, I hope this doesn't happen, but I think there's a very real chance that this can have a lasting negative effect on our alliances, which have made us the leader of the world, certainly the leader of the free world, but the leader of the world since World War II.
Congressman Engel, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Richard.
All right, when we come back, a Capitol Hill insider joins us to discuss what's happening behind the scenes, that is, both sides remain far apart and dug in on this shutdown. ABC News political director Rick Klein News next.